Everybody, I'm going to show you how to build trust quickly when you start a presentation. In fact, I'm going to share with you five ways to build trust at the beginning of a presentation. And let me tell you this. The whole goal of a presentation is to do something, right? Usually to convince someone, to persuade someone, to motivate somebody, to shift them in some way. And when you're talking to people who don't know you at all or don't know you well, that first few minutes is crucial because that's where you begin to lay down sort of like the roots of trust and affinity. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to have to work extra hard to try to get your point across and to teach. Because think of it in this way. All of us, we tend to put filters on, sort of like glasses. We put glasses on, and that's how we see the world. And so when you get up on stage, whether that you are asked to speak at a session at a conference or you are asked to speak to the board of directors, doesn't matter where it is, but when you get on stage, everyone is waiting to put on a pair of glasses. They just don't know which glasses to put on yet. Arrogant jerk glasses, right? You say something in the first 30 seconds and someone thinks, what a jerk, then that's the glasses they put on. And now every part of your presentation is going to be filtered through those until you give them a reason to take them off. Or glasses of this person doesn't know what they're talking about, right? If they're going to put that on, then of course they're going to be they're going to have a lot of suspicion throughout your presentation. So we don't want that, right? What we want is for people to, excuse me, listen and be open-minded. That's like the best audience you could hope for. So anyways, I want to share some things with you that I have learned over the decades of being on stage. I have given about 2,500 presentations, and I've learned a lot along the way. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm going to share some of the go-to things that I do. And some of these, nobody will teach you in a book. So I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. Before I get to that, we are excited here at the company. We just launched our podcast that we have been talking about for a long time. It's called Born to Climb, and it features stories of people who dared greatly and sometimes came up short, other times didn't, but wanted to do something great with their life. And just some amazing guests on there. We just launched it this week. If you would like to have some inspiration in your daily commute or whatever it might be, then go to jamesrobbins.com/podcast and make sure you sign up there. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, all the usual places. Okay, so let's get into this. How to build trust fast when you start a presentation. I'm going to bring you 5 things that you can do. And this first one might surprise you a little bit, but it actually has to do with how you dress. So when you get up to speak in front of a group. Now, we're not talking about when you're speaking in front of your team who knows you. This is not what this is all about. It's about when you're getting up in front of a group who largely doesn't know you. The first thing is dress. So I want you to think about this for a moment. Who's ever at the front of the room, at the very minimum, should be dressed the same as everyone else, but preferably one level up. Now, what do I mean by level? If you think about it, there are levels of how we dress. So let's say maybe the bottom lowest rung on the ladder in a workplace might be like super casual, t-shirts, jeans, sweatpants, what it depends where you're working. So that might be the most basic level, right? And then what's up from that? Well, then we go to dress shirts. What's up from that? Dress shirts and a jacket, at least for the men. Ladies, I'm not an expert at your fashion, but you know the principle I'm talking about here, right? Jacket and dress shirt. What's up from that? Jacket, dress shirt, tie. Maybe what's up from that? 3-piece suit. What's up from that? Tuxedo. So there's all these different levels, and each one of them carries, in a sense, an energy, a message. And so you never want to be more than 2 levels above your audience. So let's do an absurd example. Let's say you run a tech company and everybody just wears t-shirts all day, and I come in to speak and I show up with a tuxedo. I have put such a distance between myself and the audience that right away it's like he's not one of us. And people don't necessarily consciously think this, but we judge people based on how they're dressed. And if they're dressed too far above where we're dressed, or even too far below, then that's a problem. So aim to be one level up from your audience. I was going into speak somewhere one time where everybody just, wears a bunch of pretty casual uniforms, and the organizer wanted me to come in with suit and tie. And I was like, well, I'm going to lose the tie because I'll still be a level up, but I won't be too far up. So anyways, that's one. Super practical. The second thing, though, has to do with finding moments of affinity. All right, so this is super important. When you get up in front of an audience, what you want to establish quickly is that we are alike. Now, you can do that through several ways. I mean, one is just the experience of humanity, which I'll get to in a moment, like weaknesses, struggles, all of that. But what we want to do is we want to find where our circles have overlapped. If we're going to have a Venn diagram of the audience's life, right, and my life, I want to find an intersection. And so I will do that in my opening. Now, a lot of speakers will get up and they just have this canned opening that they do every time. Okay, that's fine. I don't do that. Before the canned opening, depending on the situation, I will find some affinity. So let me give you some examples. When I am speaking in a rural environment, I'm opening with a story of how I grew up on a cattle ranch. When I'm speaking to rural hospitals, I'm opening up with a story of how I was out behind the barn playing with matches and gasoline and set myself on fire and had to go into a little rural hospital that saved my life. When I was speaking to the top executives at the United States Postal Service, I opened with a story of when I was 6 years old and I ordered something from my mom on the television, and because you had to do that back in the day, quickly write the number down after you've seen the commercial 5 times. But I was sharing how this whole, waiting for this package to come, hoping that the mail would deliver this thing for my mom before Christmas, which they did. I just added some tension there. So excuse me. So even though I never worked for the post office, at least I could tell a story that this small slice of my life that would line up with them. I go and speak to a manufacturing audience. I'm talking about the first promotion I ever had as a leader was at a meatpacking plant. So you're looking for a place where your life intersects with their life, and you find a way to bring that in. It doesn't have to be your opening story, by the way, but you find a way to bring that in so people are like, okay, he understands a little bit of my world, or he's a little bit like me or like we are. So find a place for affinity. Thirdly, demonstrate expertise. So demonstrating expertise, people want to know, do you know what you're talking about? Because we don't want to wait for halfway through the presentation where we're teaching some great stuff and they're like, oh, this guy really does know what he's talking about. We want to at least lay some of those seeds down. Now, how do we do that? One way is through a well-written introduction. So when you go to speak at a conference, or if you're asked to speak somewhere, and they say, what do you want us to say about you when we introduce you? And a lot of people say, I don't know, just say whatever. Don't do that. You want to be able to write an introduction, short, doesn't have to be long, but somewhere in there showcases that you know what you're talking about. And so obviously you're not going to overdo it. Like so-and-so's the expert, the best in the world, unless you really are the best in the world at that. But, you want something to showcase results, especially if you've been recognized for something. So depending on the crowd that I'm speaking to, but sometimes in my introduction, it'll say author of the best-selling book, 9 Minutes on Monday, number one business book of the world, of the year, like 2012, right? So those are just some things of these authority markers. I will sometimes mention, in 2018, Inc. magazine named James one of the top leadership speakers. So I'll have them say things like that because I'm telling them to say it because these are things that happen. Because that's if a crowd doesn't know me, I want them to know, okay, I know something. Or if I am speaking to a not-for-profit audience, I will put in the intro how for over a decade I led not-for-profit organizations. So again, whatever your intro is going to be, make sure that it says something nice about you. When I first started getting asked to speak on stage and people would want to introduce me, I had that sort of, it was imposter syndrome, maybe a little bit of the country humility. Shucks, I don't want to say that about myself, but you have to get over that because that's all about you. I really need you to hear this. That's all about you because you just don't want to be judged. You just want to be safe. You don't want somebody to dislike you. You don't want someone to think you're arrogant. Listen, don't be arrogant, right? But you're not going to be that. And understand that the reason you're doing that is so that people will put on the right glasses to watch your presentation. Because if you have a message you believe in, you want to get it through. So don't hinder the message by being falsely humble. That's what I'm saying there. However, this is going to bring us to point number 4, because it's sort of the counterbalance to you're amazing. You have to have a little bit in there like, I also suck a little bit, right? I'm extraordinary, but also ordinary. And it's kind of this hero-zero balance you bring in. So I do that in several ways when I'm in a presentation. One is in one of the introductions, I'll have people read, and I throw some humor in using the rule of threes. Right near the end of my introduction, they'll say, he's this, and then the third one, it'll be something funny like, when James isn't on stage, he's often in therapy, trying to get over his fear of heights or whatever it is. It'd be something that's a little bit poking fun at myself. In my main keynote that I get asked to do, where I'm telling this story about us climbing the highest mountain in Bolivia, it doesn't take long into the story where people realize I am not the hero of the story. In fact, I am the loser of the story. And just to punctuate this whole point, I was speaking at an audience in Pennsylvania, to an audience. And so I went through the whole story that I take people through. And after, a guy came up to me and he said, "Man, I really loved your presentation." He goes, "I have to say, to be honest, when you first got up there, I thought, oh, here goes another one of these mountain climber guys that, willed their way up to the summit." And so that was the glasses he had put on before I'd ever opened my mouth. He already was judging me. And, then I quickly get in there and people realize I'm like the worst guy on the mountain that day. But they relate with that. So remember, everyone carries around with them some part of doubt, some piece of insecurity. Everyone in different doses. And the last thing people want is to be talked down to or talked to in a way that they feel like you're superior. So in the introduction or in that early time where you're trying to set some authority, right, it can sound like bragging, but it's more, hey, I know what I'm talking about, but then also, I'm an average, I'm just an average guy. Right? So both of those messages have to get through, and that creates that rapport. So that's the funny part of it. It's like, I need to trust you because you know what you're talking about, but I also need to relate with you so that I can feel good about being taught by you. These are just subtle things that you want to do in the opening. The last thing, number 5. Number 5 is borrowed trust. Borrowed trust is when you leverage off someone else the audience already trusts. So how this works is if you know someone in the audience or the person who hired you or brought you in, you want to acknowledge that relationship. So I do this often. So, for example, I was speaking in Canada last year to a mining company, speaking to all the leaders of this large mining company. But the CEO, I had met the CEO years ago at another conference in California. And we kept in touch over the years. And so when I went up to speak to now his leaders, my first slide was a slide from the event, a photo from the event that I took when I was there years ago. He wasn't actually even in the picture, but I just said, hey, my time with so-and-so goes back a few years when we were at this dinner, right? And I just briefly mentioned the story, and then I say something nice about the person who hired me and how we'd kept in touch over the years. Anyways, I do that so that everyone else knows, oh, you know each other, right? That helps people just subconsciously trust you when you know the person that they already trust. So that's borrowed trust. If you have somebody in the room that you know and they know everyone else, man, you got to make sure you borrow some of that trust. And again, it's as simple as acknowledging the relationship. So none of these things that I mentioned take that much time, but let's just review them really quickly, right? How to build trust fast when you start a presentation. Number one, how you dress. Don't dress more than 2 levels above the audience. In fact, better just 1 level. Just dress 1 level above. Number 2, look for a point of affinity. Look for a place where your circle interacts with theirs and speak to that, usually in some type of a story. Number 3, make sure that you are able to speak about your expertise or results, or have the person who's introducing you talk about your expertise, your track record. That's really important. Number 4, make sure if you have the superhero part, make sure there's also a little bit of the zero part that comes in there about basically where you suck, though you're not going to quite say it in that way, but something that can be self-effacing, that helps the audience feel great. And then number 5, borrowed trust. Find someone that everyone else trusts and talk about that relationship, and that's going to help you out. So those 5 things, the next time you have a presentation, create a checklist, get all those 5 things in, and you will find that the crowd will be a lot more responsive to you. They'll be with you. They're not going to be sitting there like on their phones, because even out of that, they want to respect you and give you that respect you deserve because they feel a trust and an affinity towards you. All right? Do those 5 things. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Not only do we do training here, all our podcast guests come onto this channel, so make sure you subscribe here and check out our new podcast, Born to Climb. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll already see the episodes here, but you can also get that on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. All right, everybody. Until next time, keep climbing.